Former Israeli MP Ruth Lande went on LBC with Nick Ferrari, and hats off to Nick. He wasn't having any of her excuses over the 5 journalists killed in that drone strike. He gave her space to explain, but when she kept circling back to the same old lines we've heard for nearly 2 years, Nick cut straight through the spin. Eventually, he'd had enough and ended the call. Let's take a look.
We can restrict ourselves to those 5 from Al Jazeera. What evidence do you have that satisfies you that this was a valid action by the IDF?
So the IDF, as the spokesperson said, has indicated clearly that some things could be declassified, and they were declassified, and there were pictures provided, by the way, they're completely public, of the specific journalist, Anas, who was documented himself in Hamas uniform
but how
with
recent
weapons.
Was that, Ms. Musselman Lande? How recent was that?
No, very recent. The guy is a very young man in the territory, in Gaza and elsewhere. It was not years ago. This is very recent.
Well, the tracking document that's been put out dates back to 2023. But even if we allow that this gentleman was in some way working for Hamas, what of those who were with him?
It's not in some way, sir. I would like to stress, these are men who work for Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera...
Are you telling me that all 5 of them, in your view, were Hamas operatives?
I don't know that, and I cannot give you that answer. I can tell you that Anas specifically...
So I appreciate your candor. Thank you. So if you don't know...
You're welcome.
How can you possibly sanction the murder of what possibly 4 innocent journalists, allowing that you believe Anas al-Sharif to be a Hamas operative?
So first of all, Anas was killed not in a targeted manner and not because he is a so-called journalist, and I say this in inverted commas, but because he is a Hamas operative. I don't know regarding the rest.
But how can you justify that? I appreciate it wasn't your action. I appreciate, and I'm very grateful that you come in as a former member of Knesset, but how can you justify 4 innocent journalists, or I think one of them was a field producer, so go ahead.
I'm trying to answer. I can, and I do have the information that the Israeli policy, as opposed to what that French journalist said prior to my speaking, is absolutely not to target innocent civilians and or journalists. And any and all evidence that needs to be declassified to show that not only Anas, but the other 4 are not innocent civilians will be provided. There is no policy by the Israeli IDF and or government to target journalists. This is not something that we do. On the contrary, we are convinced.
But why is it then that figures from the 2 organizations, Independent Freedom Journalists and the CPJ, says that 274 journalists have been killed in various operations in Gaza, 269 of them are Palestinian? How can you possibly say the IDF isn't killing journalists?
Because the IDF is killing operatives that work for the Hamas.
All 274 now, are they? They're all Hamas.
The Hamas... it's a pity that you are laughing because I'm
not laughing. I just find I say to you, I find it risible that you want my listeners to believe of the 274 journalists who've died since the 11th of August 2025, numbers certified by 2 separate organizations, respectfully, 269 of them of whom were Palestinian. You want my listeners to believe they were all journalists. That's what I find risible.
So respectfully, sir, if I may finish a full sentence, please. Perhaps I will allow your listeners to have a little bit more information.
Please.
The Palestinian Gazans who have been hired by Al Jazeera to be so-called journalists, by the way, not a few of them had actually taken hostages and tortured our hostages, and this has been a proven point told by hostages that have been given back in agreed upon agreements with the Hamas. So those so-called journalists have been in Gaza, young people, they've been in the indoctrinating process of Hamas for the past 20 years. They have been so-called covering the so-called horrors of Israel and accompanying Hamas operatives all along.
All right, all 274 then, you believe, lastly?
First of all, 274 is a number that has been given by whom?
By whom? By the two separate organisations, the Committee for the Protection of Journalists and the Independent Freedom of Journalists Organisation, so both journalists' bodies.
Okay, so those journalist bodies,
They're lying
if they
as well,
give
are they,
the
Ruth?
names, if they... Why are you putting words in my mouth, may I ask?
What-
Did I say that?
Because you've disputed every single figure that's been put
I've
forward.
not disputed. I am saying
you
a
disputed
fact, sir.
Reporters Sans Frontières. I would imagine you will dispute these two. So that's
The
three
reporters
separate organisations that
without-
put these figures out, Ruth.
I have not disputed. What I'm saying is very simple. The Hamas and organizations are saying that Israel is targeting journalists. I am telling you, Israel is not targeting journalists. What is happening is that Israel is targeting Hamas operatives that are killing our people, and by the way, killing Palestinians as well, on a daily basis, by the way.
I'm grateful for your time. Thank you. I must leave it there. Thank you for your time, Ruth.
This was most definitely a targeted strike. A tent housing Al Jazeera journalists and camera operators. Anas and 5 other correspondents instantly lost their lives. And what's even more disturbing is Ruth's own admission. She couldn't say whether the others were connected to Hamas. That's not a defense, that's a confession. If you can't show evidence, then what you're really saying is these people may have been innocent. She insisted Israel doesn't target journalists or civilians, but then look at the reality. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, more than 270 journalists and media workers have been killed since this war began, the vast majority Palestinian. That's not propaganda. That's documented. The numbers alone speak louder than the excuses we just heard. Ruth kept promising that evidence would be declassified, that proof would eventually come to light. But how many times have we heard that same line? We're still waiting for evidence from previous strikes on food shelters, on schools, on hospitals. Each time the promise is made, each time nothing follows. And in the meantime, more families bury their loved ones. Nick Ferrari was right to press her, and he was right to cut it short. The spin had already collapsed under its own weight. Sometimes, letting the words hang in the air is enough. Viewers can see the cracks for themselves. And here's the truth. You don't need to be an expert or an analyst to recognize what's happening. When excuses keep piling up, when promises of evidence are never delivered, when the death toll keeps climbing, it tells you everything you need to know. This isn't accountability, this isn't justice. This is propaganda being stretched to its breaking point. Anyway, guys, that's where I'll leave it for now. But I want to hear from you. What did you make of this exchange? Do you believe Ruth when she says Israel doesn't target journalists? Or do the numbers tell a different story? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. I rate as many as I can, and your perspectives are a big part of what keeps this channel going. If you've made it this far into the video, do me a favor, hit that like button. It really helps push this video out to more people who need to see it. And if you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future breakdowns like this. I'll keep covering the stories others are too afraid to touch. And together we can make sure these conversations don't just get swept under the rug. Thank you for watching, thank you for supporting, and above all, thank you for refusing to look away. I'll catch you all in the next video. Peace out.